But what caused the financial success was not extreme ability. You know, I have a good mind, but I'm way short of prodigy. And I've had results in life that are prodigious. And that came from tricks. I just learned a few basic tricks from people like my grandfather.
What were those tricks?
What kind of?
Charlie, welcome to our Redlands family.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
I always like these awkward moments.
I know that. You're supposed to start.
Oh, I'm supposed to start. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is an amazing evening. I've had the pleasure to spend, I think, 3 times with Charlie, 4 times. Once at his house in Hancock Park, and then from time to time he comes to Redlands. Isn't that amazing? So I'll simply start with an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question. Charlie, you have investments in a lot of places like Mill Valley and Santa Barbara, and you live in Hancock Park, and sometimes you say that Pasadena is your second home, and then you have various investments around Claremont, and now investing here in Redlands. Why are you investing in Redlands? What do you think about Redlands? I mean, what is it that attracts you here? I mean, I can see a kind of pattern there: Santa Barbara, Mill Valley, Pasadena, Claremont, and Redlands. So what is it, Charlie?
Well, I have a natural prejudice for this area because when I was at Caltech in 1943, I used to hang around here. My first wife went to Scripps College, and my sister went to Scripps College. And so I'm very familiar with this area. And of course, I've interfaced with a lot of the people who love these universities out here.
Yes.
And so I started with I always liked the orange trees against the mountains and the snow-capped whatever. So I started with a deep prejudice.
Yes.
But my investments here happened by accident. What happened was I live in a neighborhood which the Hasidic Jews sort of came into a few decades ago, a very successful group of people. And one day into my house, a very young 17-year-old Hasidic Jew came by and gave me the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew. And, you know, Munger sounds like it could be a German Jewish name, and it means peddler in both German and English. So it wasn't totally crazy for an Hasidic Jew to think that Munger could read the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew, but of course I couldn't. And I got to talking with him, and one thing led to another, and I sort of befriended Avi and watched him grow up. And Avi never went to college. He has a mild attention deficit disorder, but a ferociously high IQ. And he was worried about it. And I said, Avi, don't worry about it. You don't need any college. You're going to succeed mightily. Well, Avi is now 32 and has 4 children and a hugely successful business. And I was right. He didn't need college.
And Avi's sitting right there. Stand up, Avi.
Yeah, wave to the crowd. And Avi had a client, his main client in his apartment management business, and he was unhappy. And I think rightly so. And so I said to him one day, because I'd gotten to like and trust Avi, I said, why don't you just get rid of that client you got and buy a bunch of apartments for me? And the first ones we saw were the ones I bought out here. And that's how it happened.
And by the way, they're at the end of Alabama, you know, those beautiful apartments. Yeah, they're really amazing. Yeah.
Parkview
Terrace.
Terrace.
Great. I think half of the occupants of those apartments work at AS3. So one day I'm sitting there and he calls me and he says, could I come out and talk to you? Of course, I didn't exactly know who Charlie was. So sure, yeah, okay. And that's what began this friendship, actually. It's amazing.
But we've had a fair amount of fun, Avi and his partner, Ruben and I. And it's kind of creative to buy old apartments and fix them up. And of course, we have a philosophy that there is no income unless the place is properly cared for. And the apartment management field is full of people who just milk the properties and do the very minimum. And that's a stupid mistake if you're a long-term investor. And Avi and I share a belief that all these things should be immediately improved. And I think in the first, year or something like that, we spent $600,000 on trees on just 4 projects.
He's got my heart right there.
Yeah. I was going to say, was that a planted question?
No,
it was not a planted
it was not. And, but
Oh, Larry.
But Jack, you're probably doing it out of love, and I know how much better it's going to work for me, so I don't deserve much credit because it's very much in my interest financially to plant all those trees. Now, I would probably plant them anyway, but I can't prove that. At any rate, that's how we came out here, and of course I like the mountains, and I like the trees, and I like the people, and I like these good colleges. I didn't start out with the idea I'd picked Redlands out of the world. It's just where this apartment project that caught my attention was. But once I was here, I did not know there was an Esri company. I have made my way in life with a pencil and a pen and a calculating machine and a compound interest table, and I haven't looked at a calculus question since I was 19 years old. So I'm totally a creature of old-fashioned horse sense and a little arithmetic. And so I don't know about software companies like Esri. And so if I'd known, I would have paid more for the project.
That's good.
You know, it's a huge blessing to go into community. There's a big employer that keeps hiring and so forth. And Avi is so smart. I didn't suggest that he start giving. There are all kinds of rules in apartment house operators about guarantees of leases and down payments and what have you. And not every new employee of Esri qualifies. And Avi just took one look at the situation and he waives all those requirements for anybody that wants to work at Esri.
Thank you, Avi. I really appreciate that.
Well, but there again, he doesn't deserve any credit. That's a smart business trick. So he doesn't know whether he's being nice or being greedy. I don't. Whatever. I like these things where a confluence of 2 factors is working in the right direction.
Yeah.
But I happen to think I share Jack's interest in design and architecture, which is an absolute accident. My uncle was a graduate of the Harvard School of Architecture, and I am a graduate of the Harvard Law School. And I have done a fair amount of house building for myself and building projects of various kinds in my long life. And so it's kind of a hobby with me to do what Jack does sort of professionally. And so, of course, man, I see this beautiful campus and this very successful company. And I'm also a total nut on the subject that the best way to get what you want in life is to deserve what you want. And of course, if you apply that to business, that means you really take care of the customers. And it's perfectly obvious that what's happened to Esri would not have happened if it weren't terribly good at taking care of the customers. And of course, that's, again, I don't deserve any credit for doing it. I know I make more money taking care of the customers than I would if I were more short-term operating. And so I don't want to masquerade as a better fellow than I am because since it works so well, I don't think it'd be nice if I were like Mother Teresa and do something I didn't like doing. Because I'm a noble soul, but my life is organized so that just time after time, what works for my pocketbook works for every moral teaching that I've been taught.
Yeah.
And anybody who's in such a position is very lucky. And you people who work for a company like Esri are hugely lucky too, because there are a lot of employers that are defective.
One of the things I have as a question is, you have acquired many companies, you and Warren together in your career. You've looked at probably thousands. What's the kind of philosophy that you have determining what's a good company and what's not a good company? And I'm not suggesting that you've had perfect success in all of your acquisitions, because I know you haven't. You told me that. But what is your sort of philosophical rule base for when you're looking at organizations to invest in or acquire?
Well, we have a very peculiar way of looking at things. We want to buy something that's intrinsically a very good business, meaning that an idiot could run it and it would do all right. And then we want that business, which an idiot could run successfully, to have a wonderful person in it running it. And if we have a wonderful business with a wonderful person running it, that really turns us on, and it works very well. And now we do make exceptions, but not many. And it's a pretty simple philosophy. Warren sometimes says you have to choose good person or good business. You know what he says? This is not politically correct. He says good business. He wants something that has such tremendous strength. I had a friend when I practiced law, and he said, if it won't stand a little mismanagement, it's not much of a business. And we like businesses that stand a lot of mismanagement but don't get it. So that's our formula. And we can't make it work perfectly, but it certainly worked better than most people's methods have been. And we reject some wonderful businesses with some wonderful people where it's just too tough.
Yeah.
And I took on once, I've been so lucky in life that I took on once a job of being chairman of a nonprofit hospital because it was a losing hand. Too many competitors, too weak a position. It had a lot of terrible defects. And I said, you know, this is good for me. Expose myself to the disappointments of the real world. And I want to tell you, it was 40 years of mixed agony and pleasure. and the agony never went away. It was, if the business is tough enough, it has a way of staying tough. As Warren says that when a business with a reputation for being tough and a manager with an opportunity for being brilliant get together, he says it's the reputation of the business that remains. And if they start tough, they stay tough.
Yeah.
It's really hard to change a whole business or a person. Lots of luck if you're disappointed in one of your children.
You started. Yeah. One time you mentioned that you have a particular way of making deals with people, your friends, business deals. Could you sort of express that to this crowd? Your sort of philosophy about, do you try to win at all costs, or what is your?
No.
What do you do?
Again, what really works in life is win-win, and that requires some sensitivity to the other fellow's way of thinking and his needs too. But win-win is the only formula that really will work on and on and on. And when it really starts working, when two people trust each other, imagine, take an operating theater at the Mayo Clinic. The whole damn group trusts one another. There's not a lot of lawyers or, they just know what to do and when to do it and who to call on for what help, and everybody does what they're supposed to and so on. So we're trying to get these win-win relations, and of course I see it all the time. Costco has this reputation. I'm a director of Costco, and Costco has this reputation of being a fairly tough buyer. I don't regard them as that tough. There are a lot of people who are rich as small suppliers at Costco. But Costco is into win-win, and that's what really works.
Yeah, it's win-win with their customers, but it's also win-win with their suppliers, and it's also win-win with their employees.
Absolutely. Everybody has to win-win.
Yeah.
And Peter Coughlin, whom you know well, is just
Peter was here a few weeks ago. Did anybody see Peter? He's a close friend of
Well, Peter's the ultimate win-win operator, and the last person I want to compete with in life is Peter. He just takes such good care of the customers. I've never heard any complaint from Peter's customers except that his price is high. Everything else about the business is perfect.
Larry, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I don't want to totally, but I'm going to change it from the subjects you've been asking, Jack. and forewarning, spoiler alert, we talked about this backstage. I think you have a surprising take on a question that I was asking about philanthropy in this country, and you gave an analysis that to me was quite unexpected that I wasn't really thinking about. So can I have you?
Yeah, I'm glad to repeat it. What I have noticed in my life is that in Europe, they do not have American philanthropy. It's just different. The only country in Europe where the people give heavily and routinely the way we do in America is Holland, and they were fighting the North Sea together.
Right.
35% of Holland is under sea level, and they really had to help one another with the dikes and so forth. And in America, we had the pioneers taking away the country from hostilities and danger and bad climate and so forth. And everybody had to help everybody else. So I think that both Holland and the United States were helped with a big tradition of philanthropy by the common hardship. And I think it's a great strength that we have in America. And if any of us were transplanted to Italy or France or Germany, we'd feel we're among the most selfish people.
Yeah.
They just don't have much of a tradition of giving. And I don't know about you, but my involvement with charitable activities has been a big part of my life. And I think I'm better for it, and I've had a better life. So I think they're missing out.
How do you do it? I mean, what I've watched is you have a very specific set of things you do, and I'm totally charmed by it, but also interested in having you share it.
Well, not everybody is charmed by it because I get begging letters every day, and I just throw them in the wastebasket, particularly when they come from individuals I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling if I started responding to those, I'd have nothing but letters. But I'm like everybody else. I have things that interest me more than other things. And I have done a lot of philanthropy where I've mixed my own ideas with my money. And my attitude there is a lot like what McNamara told the Chinese when he went over there when they were still mired in communism without Chinese characteristics. And McNamara says, we're giving you all this money from my World Bank. He says, but I want you to know something. He says, the ideas I'm promoting are going to help you a lot more than this enormous amount of money. And so it worked out. What a little free enterprise did when added to Chinese communism was take 800 million people up to a billion something people, and 80% of them were living in stoop labor and subsistence agriculture. They were living like the people of Central Africa live. And it wasn't all that many years, but with the Chinese have a big middle class and an average GDP of $10,000 a person instead of $300 a person.
It's transformed the world.
And the ideas were worth more. And you have to give the Chinese credit for, one of those old communists said, I don't care if the cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. They watched the Chinese man in Singapore take a malarial swamp and turn it into almost a paradise with a 70% Chinese population. And they're sitting there in this poverty and obscurity and no toilets and really very tough lives. And here is Singapore flourishing with its Chinese population. And that old communist says, I want to be like Singapore. And he made it happen. Now I think he deserves some credit. In my life, I think what happened in Singapore was one of the interesting bits of political science that ever happened in the history of the world. I would argue that Lee Kuan Yew is probably the greatest nation builder that ever built. Now, occasionally he would use a pretty tough method. When he took over, he was a very young man, and he needed an army. He was surrounded by a bunch of Muslims that hated him. And in fact, they'd spit him out. And he asked all the other nations of the world to please help him get an army, because the English just left and said, handle your own problem. And every nation in the world refused to help him but one, and that was Israel. And he said, how am I going to take military aid surrounded by Muslims who hate me from Israel? He finally figured it out. He accepted the aid and told everybody they were Mexicans. Well, you can see why he was so successful. He had a mantra, which doesn't have any literary quality, but it has a lot of good sense in it. He'd say over and over again, figure out what works and do it. Mm-hmm. That's what Bill Modern said.
Very
before.
Practical.
Very practical. Figure out what works and do it.
Do a follow-up on this. Do you feel that philanthropically, are people, I know there's not a gene, but born with an instinctive sense that to help, or is it a learned trait as one gets on?
I think there's a million different reasons for philanthropy. And one thing that is very interesting that I've observed in my life, I've known a lot of roguish people that made a fair amount of money, and they start giving a little money to show off. And 20 years later, they're actually real philanthropists. You become what you pretend to be to some considerable extent. And having observed this so much, I think there's something to be said for hypocrisy, but that's not a common observation, but I've seen it do so much good in life that I don't think it's all bad, the hypocrisy. I always try to pretend to be a little better than I am. Not too much.
By the way, don't you read a book a day, something like that?
Well,
maybe not.
I read and I skim a lot.
Yeah.
I do the accidents of life. People give me books. I live in a torrent of books, and perfect strangers give me books.
Yeah.
Lots of them. And I almost never buy a book anymore. When I was younger, I used to order them from the book review columns of the New York Times. And now that it's torrent of books comes in, I just select what I want. And I'm amazed at how well some of these people are reading me.
And what has that done to your life, I think?
Well, it was perfect for me. I don't think you can take every bookish little boy and turn him into a billionaire by patting him on the head and say, read all you want, Johnny. But if it were that easy, there'd be more billionaires. But it enormously helped me. And I think reading, once you've learned it, reading and arithmetic, you can take in so much, and you can take it in on your own time schedule. If somebody's talking to you, he may be telling you something you don't want to know, you already know, it's too hard, or he's going too fast or too slow. Yeah. But when you're reading, you can just
take it as
you want it. So it's just God's gift. If you're into self-education, there's nothing like reading. And of course, people who do a lot of it have an enormous advantage. And
what does that say to education?
Yeah,
Larry, you might have a question.
Yeah, back to this issue about sort of today, you have such a variety and depth of diverse interests and ways in which you acquire knowledge and observation and all the rest. Where do you think we're headed in terms of specialization versus a broad-based, at least
well,
platform?
Of course, specialization is the safest way up for most people. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, say surgeons know more and more about less and less. And that's what gets rewarded. And if you have a nasty fistula in your colon, you do not want a surgeon who's good at Proust or political science. It's understandable how the world rewards this specialization. I never liked it. And I loved picking up new ideas, being a passionate reader. And so I decided I'd make whatever living I could make doing what I like to do, which is sort of romping over a whole field. I do not recommend it to other people because the safe way up is to know a hell of a lot about something. And under our system, they find you out. Now, Esri wouldn't have worked very well if you also raked lawns. You know,
You never know, really. I've done my share of it.
yeah, well, I mean, but if you had everybody out here
Wouldn't work.
working by the hour raking lawns on their spare time, it wouldn't work very well. And
I think what Larry's trying to get at is the role of a liberal arts education. What is your thoughts about that?
well, it's an enormous advantage. Of course, if you learn your own language, that's a very useful gift. And of course, learning the basic math of life is another tremendous gift. And if you're really good at picking up language and doing just basic arithmetic, you can take enormous territory. You don't need much else. I have never looked at a calculus problem since I left Caltech. Never left it. Never looked once, never used it. And I was a whiz. By the way, I went away totally. 70 some years, that was enough. Yeah, I don't know about your calculus, but mine is gone. But this other stuff never goes away. And if you keep honing it and if you get good at it, then you learn something that's more important than what they teach you in college, is you learn the method of learning. When I want to know something, I just learn it. And take, for instance, I got to the Harvard Law School. I couldn't figure out how Reverend Moon was inviting people out to one weekend, and they came back brainwashed zombies for the rest of their lives. And nobody in the Harvard Law School could explain it to me. So I said, I'll figure it out for myself. You know, my mother had a little nursery rhyme, a little red hen that said, I'll do it myself, said the little red hen. So I said, I'll figure this out. Well, it took me a long time. But I finally figured out to my satisfaction exactly what was being done. They just stumbled into this through practice evolution. It wasn't calculated forethought. They just assembled a bunch of psychological tricks and pounded them on these people all at once under conditions involving stress. And at a certain point, the brain would just snap. And they had these people transformed into slaves. Boom. Well, that was a very interesting thing, but of course nobody wants to talk about it because it has implications, people fear. But I think that that habit of if they won't explain it to you, figure it out for yourself, has helped me enormously in life. It's also hurt me because you give terrible offense when you go into somebody else's profession and act like you know more than he does.
Right.
And I'm much smoother now than I was when I was young. And I'm still pretty insufferable.
What are you thinking about today's economy in reference to 10 years ago, in reference to 20, 30, 40 years ago? What's going on today?
Well, what's going on in politics is that the people hate each other more than they used to. It wasn't that we didn't have political hatreds in the old days, but now the hatred is you can cut with a knife on both sides. I think it's very ugly, and I also think it is stupid to allow yourself to hate that much. There are two things I've noticed in a long life really do enormous damage to the bearer. And one of them is resentment and the other is hatred. And it just, what good is it going to do you to have this vast resentment of the way the world is? And of course, I've watched people work on resentment to get power in politics. Adolf Hitler did it, you know. We poor Germans have been abused, blah, 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 waving his arms. And I think that we have drifted on both sides into way too much hatred and way too much resentment. And I think it does terrible damage to the bearer. You can be disappointed in your political opponent. You don't have to hate him. After all, you're probably as much of a nutcase as he is in some ways.
Yeah,
Well, does it scare you about our times, or what do you think? Do you think it's going to all work out?
Well,
swing back
there's
and forth?
always been a fair amount of it in politics, you know. And Jefferson and Hamilton hated each other. And Franklin didn't even Franklin had a certain amount of resentment and hatred, and he worked hard at being sensible. No, I think that we have way too much it's blinding. You hate that much, it blinds your cognition. And there's some good in everybody. To give an extreme example, Adolf Hitler was terribly nice to his dog, his mistress, and the Jewish doctor that treated his mother's cancer. I mean, there is something. I mean, even Adolf Hitler had something good in him. I mean, you don't have to be totally mad at everybody because you don't like their politics.
What about economically? Are you afraid of the times today? I mean, compare it to 10 years ago when the Great Recession happened. And maybe if you could comment about the recession, what happened?
In a sense, you got to remember that I had the easiest time in the easiest place that any generation ever had. Imagine being born a white male in a bourgeois household, born in 1924 in Omaha, Nebraska. I've had a huge tailwind all my life. Mm-hmm. There never was a better time when more things got fixed, more diseases got cured, there was more general prosperity and improvement, and so on and so on and so on. Is the future going to be as easy for the young male born in 2021? I don't think so. I think it's going to be harder. You can almost see that coming. And, and some of it was accidental. We got this terrible hydrogen bomb, and it's given us 60-some years of peace. I mean, major peace. We have little wars. Yeah. And my father was scarcely out of one war before his son was going off in another. I think it will be tougher in the future, and I think I've been continuously invested in American enterprise for 70 years. And that was a pretty good 70 years. I think the averages are up something like 40 times in my adult life. There never was such a period before. In real inflation-adjusted time, of course, it's not 40 times. It's way less because maybe 2 or 3% of that per annum is inflation. But what are the chances, let's assume the real return was 7 or 8%. What are the chances that the person born today is going to have 7 or 8% growth and no big wars or troubles for 70 years? I'd say they're almost zero. Now, I don't think that's any reason to despair. After all, why should you despair in a world? If you have a game you can't win anyway, we're all going to die. And if you can stand that, you can stand a little depression or something.
Yeah.
That's true. But what about in a shorter time horizon? Is this a good time to invest in the stock market? It's a funny question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I am continuously invested in American equities. Mm-hmm. And I've had my Berkshire stock decline by 50% 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't bother me that much. I regard that as just a natural consequence of adult life properly lived. So if you have my attitude, it doesn't really matter. I always like Kipling's expression in that poem called If, and he said, success and failure, he says, treat those 2 imposters just the same. You just roll with it. Sometimes it's going for you and some against, and it's all part of the same game. I think if you get rid of the crazy hatreds, I don't mean you don't avoid bad people. I mean, you will seldom talk to anybody who's better at avoiding bad people than I am. But I think that's okay, but I don't hate them.
This causes me going to let...
But they won't be as good. I don't think that it's going to be as easy for the next generation as it was for me.
I understand.
Jack,
if you started all over again, you might not do as well either. I'm not anxious to go back and try. You want to go back to go and try again? No, none of us do.
I was very lucky, just like you, in a sense. I was luckier, actually, in that sense. Yes, Larry.
No, I was just going to say, to do a little housekeeping, were we reserving some time, or had we talked with him about taking any questions ultimately from the
Would
audience?
you like to take some questions from the people? Would you like to ask any questions?
I do it at the annual meeting of Berkshire all
Well,
the
sure.
time.
Well, Charlie,
Sometimes I don't answer, but I take the question.
yeah. Well, you have the same prerogative here for which you're getting paid.
Mics here. Are there mics and runners? Not sure if we have them or not. Okay, you have to speak loudly. Okay, raise your hand,
All right.
introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm
and
Chris
then,
Talon. Hey, thank you so much for doing this, Jack. This is an incredible opportunity to meet somebody. It's just so amazing. What I'm struck by, Mr. Munger, is your humor, and I'm also struck by your partner's humor in your style of communication in front of a group, especially in front of probably your shareholders. My question is was it something that you developed over time, or was it something that just sort of happened naturally through your sort of homespun storytelling ability, or your ability to understand the world?
Yeah, I think Warren and I are very much the way we were born. We were both a bit nerdish and not a huge successes as young boys. But we both had this love of humor, and we both loved understanding how things worked. And we both have been lucky enough to attract marvelous associates and partners. And so if we weren't pretty good-natured, we'd be crazy. And I don't think if you don't have humor, I don't think you can get it.
Yeah.
I think you're born with it.
That's right.
And the same with shyness and a lot of, you can conquer shyness a little, but basically I think we all live with the natures we were given, and we just have to make do. But Warren and I have fun in business, and we like our business, and we like the people we work with, and we like the problem solving. That's a huge advantage in life. If you really love problem solving, that is worth about 20 IQ points. Yeah.
Very true. Another question. Right here.
Thank you.
Introduce
You're
yourself.
wonderful to listen to. Thank you. I wonder if I could ask you to go back to maybe your 20s or something of what got you really excited when you began seeing what you might do and what your future could be, or what you seemed to be especially enthusiastic about that led you down this path. What turned you on first? Young, you could have played football.
I came from a conventional family, happy marriage, good siblings, etc. My parents' friends were wonderful people, so I had just fabulous people. In fact, I used to say I have a great trouble in Los Angeles finding people as fine as the people I used to know in Omaha. And I had a very unusually desirable situation as a young boy. And so did Warren. And although he was more unhappy when he was young than I was. And it just happened. And I think what was born in was the proper training and proper background. My grandfather Munger had been born in extreme poverty. His two parents were school teachers in a little town in Nebraska, and 2 school teachers' income enabled him to buy the meat for dinner every night at the butcher shop in the little town he lived in Nebraska. He went to the butcher shop with a nickel, and he bought the parts of the animal nobody else would eat. Now, if you start life that poor and make your own way, which my grandfather did, you're quite a fellow. And he was self-educated, and not self-educated in a rudimentary way. I mean, he spoke Greek and Latin self-educated. And so I had very interesting people as my examples. And my grandfather Munger believed down to the soles of his feet in being rational. And he worked at it. And I watched it, and of course it worked well for him. It had made him district attorney and president of the Bar Association, and finally a very young federal judge, and he served as the only federal judge in his capital city for almost 40 years. I mean, he had a splendid life. And he always lived way below his income and was able to help other people when they needed help. He was a very good example. And he was kind of firm about it. He never took a drop of liquor in his whole life. Somebody asked him once, why don't you drink? And he says, why would I take money out of my pocket and put something in my mouth that would make my head work less well? Well, you can say why I like my grandfather. And he was politically incorrect when my parents got married. He came, he looked around the congregation, and it came time for him to make a toast. He said, well, he says, I'm always particularly optimistic at a wedding when I see the same kind of people on both sides of the aisle. Well, that's not politically correct, but it's a very understandable sentiment. And so anyway, I had these good people around me, and a very interesting time of peace and so forth. But what caused the financial success was not extreme ability. You know, I have a good mind, but I'm way short of prodigy. And I've had results in life that are prodigious. And that came from tricks. I just learned a few basic tricks from people like my grandfather.
What were those
What
tricks?
kind of? Now everybody's leaning in, wanting to know.
It's too late for you old guys. There are all kinds of tricks that I just got into by accident in life. One, I invert all the time. I was a weather forecaster when I was in the Air Corps. And how did I handle my new assignment? Being a weather forecaster in the Air Corps is a lot like being a doctor that reads x-rays. It's a pretty solitary.
Yeah.
You're in the hangar in the middle of the night and drawing weather maps and you're clearing pilots, but you're not interfacing with a bunch of your fellow men very much. And so I figured out the minute I was actually making weather forecasts for real pilots, I said, how can I these pilots? Now, that's not the question that most people would ask, but I want to know what the easiest way to them would be so I could avoid it. And so I thought it through in reverse that way, and I finally figured out, I said, there are only two ways I'm ever going to, I was in the ferry command, there are only two ways I'm going to kill a pilot. He says, I'm going to get him to icing his plane can't handle, and that will kill him. Or I'm going to get him someplace where he's going to run out of gas before he can land because all the airports are sucked in. And I just was fanatic about avoiding those two hazards. And if Kobe Bryant had had somebody like me, he'd still be with us. Yeah, it was so stupid to kill yourself that way. But just that basic, I may have learned that from my grandfather. My grandfather would say to me when I'm swimming, he'd say, swim as long as you want, but stay near the shore. Well, but you can laugh, but
No,
he was a very wise man.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that you, as a discipline, look at what the risk is on the other side of the situation and you avoid that. That's one of the rules, right?
Well, it's like a lot of practical problems in algebra. If you invert, you can solve it easily. If you don't, you can't solve it easily.
Exactly right.
And so, of course, I had that trick very early. And most people, they say, how can you, please tell us what you do to save India or to help India. And of course, I would approach it differently. I'd say, what could I do which would most easily hurt India? And approaching it in reverse that way, I got better results.
You look at the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, yes, and I have a whole bag of tricks like that. I went to the ROTC both in high school and college. And the ROTC taught me to fire mortar shells or artillery shells, one shot over, one shot short, and then kapow. Well, I never shot any damn shells, but I've been using that mental trick all my life. That's how I determine what size to make something.
And under.
Over and under and kapow. And so I just got a bag of tricks. And I got the right bag of tricks early. And of course, it's been of enormous help to me. Let me give you an example. I had a client once when I was a young lawyer, and he owned a bunch of hilly ranch land on the edge of civilization, not very far from here in Southern California. And the Edison Company came through and they wanted a new easement through his land. They already had some easements. And he hired the leading appraiser in Orange County, real estate appraiser, and said, and he had the idea that he should have $250,000 for this easement from the Edison Company. And this leading appraiser, who was very pompous and very old and very distinguished, and he told him, no, I'm sorry, it's only $125,000 value in your damn ranch. And so he came to me and said, Charlie, can you talk some sense into this elderly appraiser? So I looked at his problem and I told the appraiser what I thought, how he was doing his own appraisal wrong. I'm not a real estate appraiser, he is. And what he had done is what he was taught to do in appraisal school. He thought the problem through in 2 dimensions, and he figured out from comparable sales what the value per acre was, and then he computed the acreage, and he had something a little bit on the damage the easement would do to the remaining property and so, but it was all done in 2 dimensions. And I said to this appraiser, you've got to do this in 3 dimensions. You know, God gave us 3 dimensions. And I said, if they put the utility towers, big transmission line towers, which is why it's going to freeze the grade. And the logical way to develop your land is to lop off the top of the hills and put them in the valley. That's the way hilly land is developed. And they're doing enormous damage to you by freezing the grade. And he wouldn't change a damn thing. So I said to my elderly client, I think you have to fire this twit. And I will hire you an appraiser who can think. And so I got him $600,000, which wasn't at all hard because I was dealing with a bunch of honest engineers at the Edison who did think in 3 dimensions. But again, that's so simple, but you'd be surprised how many lawyers would screw that one up. And of course, the people like that appraiser who didn't know his own business very well because he didn't pay attention to the fundamentals, those people are always with us. And if you just have the mental trick of constantly going back to the basics, it's pretty basic insight that
Are you conscious?
the geometrical problem in a real world is 3-dimensional.
Are you conscious of the rules, or they're just there?
Well, it's so habitual with me
Yeah, I understand.
that, and I revolve possibilities and I rag problems hard. And if they don't yield, I come back. And so this is just a bag of tricks, and it enables a non-prodigious man to get prodigious results.
Remember, last summer you bought Anadarko, the big oil company.
Yes.
And you described, I think you'd just gotten back from being with Warren for the weekend.
Yeah.
And you were describing that you didn't do all the analytics and you didn't do all of the research, but you used your bag of tricks, and you flew out to Omaha. You and Warren spent the weekend. You called up the president of the Bank of America, got the money, made the deal.
No, I didn't go to Omaha.
Or where did you go?
No, we have a telephone.
Okay. Okay. You talked. Okay, you talked to Warren about it.
Anyway.
Yeah, but you made it in about 2 days, and it was like
No.
Okay.
Warren didn't need. Warren and I have been together so long that just one grunt we can speak a volume. And no, it's perfectly obvious the Permian Basin is our #1 oil reservoir, and we don't have another like it. And it's perfectly obvious you have a preferred stock, that you have an advantage over everybody else, and plus an upside. And we've done this kind of thing before, too. So, of course, we did it, and it's not very difficult. But you're right. There are all kinds of arguments, endless due diligence, and we knew enough to act.
Based on the rules.
And why they were in a hurry,
Yeah.
yes, but you don't need perfect. If you're 96% sure, that's all you're entitled to in many cases. And I see these people doing this due diligence, and the weaker they are as thinkers, the more due diligence they do. And of course, it's just a way of allaying an inner insecurity. And of course, it doesn't work. You've got to be able to quickly understand it. How much brains does it take to know the Permian Basin is America's best oil reserve? It's layer after layer after layer. You know, there is nothing like comparable.
Yes.
And if you have an 8% dividend off the top, from a perfectly reputable place of very talented people, the woman who runs that is a production engineer. She's good. And they get better results in that shale than other people. And so it's a no-brainer. At least it's a no-brainer if you don't make it hard. But I see people, in America now they do these leverage buyouts, and these firms do what they call due diligence. And they will send armies of young lawyers out at high rates per hour to riffle through all the purchasing orders at a place like Esri.
Don't even think about it.
No. I'm not thinking about it. But my point is Esri wouldn't.
No.
You don't have to look through the purchasing orders
Right.
to know that Esri is a good business. And I don't think people who are that insecure mentally ought to be in positions of decision-making power.
Yeah,
That's good.
I'll applaud that one.
Okay, we got one more question. What's it going to be? It better be a good one.
It's a good one.
Okay. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Joshua Gillespie. Thank you, Larry, Jack, Charlie, for all being here. Charlie, like you, I am very excited about investing in undervalued assets. However, specifically what I'm interested in is low socioeconomic, young folks who are not college bound. So what specific advice, functional advice, would you give to that demographic of folk who are looking to better their lives?
Well, I don't think you can just give advice to the young and just have it automatically sprout like Jack's beanstalk. A lot of people are just natural non-sprouters. And so my technique is to find the people who have the sprouting and then fertilize them greatly. And in other words, Warren puts it in a more pithy way, as you might imagine. He says, we make silk purses out of silk. So that's our system.
That's great.
We don't know how to turn. Now I can turn any purse, any silk, into a better purse if they'll learn my tricks. But what I found there is that they either get it quickly, almost instantly, or I never get through. I don't know what Jack's experience is, but I have all kinds. They're nice people, but they got their thoughts are already there. The thoughts they already have displace.
They've been programmed in a different way than you.
And they can't accept the change.
Can't accept it, yes.
Even if they kind of suspect you're right, and you're rich and they're not, they still think they know.
Well, they're victimized by their rules or their tricks, as you call them. You happen to be brought up in an environment where the tricks.
Yeah, and one of the
your
great
programming
tricks
was
in
good.
life is to destroy your own best loved ideas. And that I worked at.
Mm-hmm.
I actually go through my best loved ideas occasionally and see
Give
if
me
I
an
can
example
weed
of-
one out,
What are you talking about? Give me an example.
Well, a good example. Well, that's a very good example, but it's not an example of this. Let me give you an example. It's a hard one. We had an executive in Berkshire who was a wonderful human being and terribly good at what he does. He was an actuary. And he was a member of our inner council, and he was with us, and we knew his wife and children, and we loved the guy, and he got a nasty cancer and was dying slowly. And we just left him there, dying and failing. And the reinsurance contracts he signed during those last 2 or 3 weeks were awful. It was a mistake. And I've never done it again. It's natural to love your friends so much. And it's hard to come down on a close friend.
Yeah.
And
It's in your rules. How can you break? It's like getting up on the same side of the bed every morning. When you believe in something, like you obviously are expressing a couple things to me. One is that you loved this guy and you didn't want to just shut him down, so you kept him in place and he screwed up. Is that the basic message?
yeah, I had a higher duty, and it was
Yeah.
I think it's a forgivable sin. You know, I'd rather have, if I'm going to have sins, I'd rather have this one than a lot of others.
Right.
But it was a mistake.
Yes.
It was a mistake.
Or maybe not.
You know, that happened to Lee Kuan Yew, this guy I admire so, who ran Singapore for so many decades. And his best friend had committed some moral act and immoral act, and it had come to life, and he committed suicide. And the wife came to a close friend and said, you know, in Chinese culture, it's a deep shame to commit suicide. Can't we cover up the suicide? He said, no, we can't cover up the suicide. Again, he was just tougher on maintaining certain standards. I don't know if that's right or not, but I suspect he was right. After all, he built an empire. He built a whole nation, and all I've done is build one wallet.
Well, I'd like to close with a couple more questions about your own philanthropy at UCSB. And first, how did you...
Well, that is, by the way, that's a marvelous example.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's an example. So here I am. I'm 95 years old this time.
This is Chancellor Yang.
Yeah, but I've got a friend who's the widow of the last surviving grandchild of Doheny, major California oilman of a former era. But it's in Santa Barbara, the ultimate NIMBYism. And she's got an 1,800-acre ranch with 2 miles of frontage on the ocean, no wind, perfect climate, great views, avocado trees. It has a private lake. It's like you can't believe it. And she can't sell it to anybody because nobody in Santa Barbara is going to be fair enough to allow her to do anything with her own property. And she really needed to sell. And so I said, Topsy, I'll give the university $70 million and it will buy the ranch with my $70 million. Well, I knew that the university is not subject to the damn Santa Barbara zoning rules. And so I had suddenly transformed $70 million into $1 billion worth of property in about 2 seconds. Now, I didn't get the billion, the university did, but I like helping the university. And particularly when I can get $1 billion worth of value for $70 million plus a little horse sense. And so
What's going to happen?
now not everybody would have known that they weren't subject to the
The
zoning
university
rules.
needs housing. Charlie saw that they needed housing. He was interested in the university. He saw this property. And so now they suddenly have the ability to build housing for students. It's a,
Well, it'll be faculty and graduate students, yeah. But it's more extreme than that. I just got approved last week by the subcommittee of the Regents to build a dormitory for undergraduates at UCSB. In this case, I'm going to give them 20% of the money, and they're going to borrow the rest at 3% or something like that. But this housing is going to put 5,000 students on 5 acres, and the housing will be the best of its kind in the world. Well, how in the hell can some 95-year-old guy who doesn't know anything to speak of about housing suddenly be right when he says we'll put 5,000 people on 5 acres and it'll be the best housing in the world? Well, but I've built other housing. I'm not quite as ignorant as I look. And I realized that all I had to do was to make a big square building, which is 10 stories high, and devote the top story to being a sort of an our town in the sky with great views, looking out at the world with high ceilings and so forth, and then adopt ship architecture for the rest of the thing, and build it out of precast concrete for the first 7 floors on a poured concrete foundation, and then build the top floor out of Butler steel components, which is what Costco uses to build its stores wherever it is allowed to do it. And when I work that out, it works like gangbusters. It can't possibly. I've already done every trick in this building. I've already done somewhere else. I've just assembled a trick out of a bag of tools. It sounds ridiculous.
Doesn't sound ridiculous. To me, it sounds like your philanthropic
Yeah, but that's the
vision.
question of
Put all the stuff together to actually make it real.
it's the mental trick that's interesting.
Yeah.
Why can't a university with an IQ average of 160 and nothing to do but think about its future? Oh, one thing else I did.
Why can't they do that on your own, is what you're saying?
Why are the universities so stupid? That's a very important question. And they're not stupid about everything. They just have a few blind spots. And one of the blind spots is they run out of land. Now, how can a great university in the most important state in the most important country in the world, how in the hell can you run out of land and think you're being a rational university? UCLA has run out of land. Berkeley has run out of land. How can places so massively brilliant, they win Nobel Prizes and so forth, be stupid enough to run out of land? The answer is they get these damn bureaucracies. And somebody has to be the adult in the room. It's not a mild bit of craziness to run out of land if you're UCLA. Well, my grandfather would say, he basically thought it was sinful to be dumber than you had to be. And I share some of that. What you can't remove, I think, is forgivable, but to have an easily removable ignorance in your own head is really stupid. But anyway, that is really going to happen. You people are going to live to see it. And building ship architecture on land, how hard a subject is that?
I've seen the plans. They're really so clever for students to live in. Views for every student to the ocean.
Well, let me tell you
Shared
the
space.
final one, what these great IQ 160 people do. It takes 20 extra square feet of space under the building code that binds a university in California, the UC system. 20 extra square feet to give a student his own private sleeping area. 20 extra square feet. Can you think of anything dumber than building housing that's going to last 200 years when you force a whole bunch of unrelated people to live together and throw up on one another and God knows what? To save 20 extra square, the incremental cost of 20 extra, it's insane. So I gave every student his own room. And when I
Hey, all right.
went to the Regents Committee, there was this nice woman, and she said, she says, I never had a single room in my whole college career where I didn't have somebody else in it. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I'm fixing it. But why wasn't it already fixed?
Well, did you study architecture, or how did you come to all of this?
Well, I hate to admit this to somebody like you who's a perfectionist, but I pick easy problems.
You are.
It's easy to fix housing when the people are so dumb they put 2 unrelated people in the same room and it takes 20 extra square feet to eliminate that defect. So I seek out easy problems. I've tried hard problems. It makes it a lot more difficult.
Okay, I got one final one,
Yeah.
Charlie. Didn't you buy See's candy?
Yes, I certainly
Why
did.
did you do that?
Why did I do it?
I mean, yeah. Anybody got a guess on?
Well, here I want to confess something that will give you all encouragement. Because it will show how dumb we all were when we were young and how we barely bought it. The price was $35 million and they had $10 million in surplus cash. and they were making $4 million a year. So hardly expensive. And it was this iconic brand.
Yeah.
And been created by a woman that was 70 years old when she founded the company. Very interesting story. And at the very end, we were about $100,000 apart. And Warren was used to saying, God damn it, you know, I'll bid 20 and an eighth, and I don't mean a quarter. And we just almost didn't buy it. And I would not, we just squeaked through. We made a wonderful decision because we were just barely smart enough to make a no-brainer. And that teaches another lesson too. We all start out stupid, and we all have a hard time staying sensible. And you have to keep working at it. Berkshire would be a wreck today if it were run by what Warren and I knew when we started. We kept learning us. And I don't think we'd have all the billions of stock of Coca-Cola we now have if we hadn't bought Seas. You know, I mean, there were huge consequences of getting over that last stupidity. We threw out our typical firm business-like methods, and what happened there, neither Warren and I deserve any real credit for. My partner, I had wonderful partners all my life, who was a petroleum engineer. He just said to Warren and me, you guys are all wrong on this. He says, this is a wonderful company and you're being way too chintzy. There aren't many companies like this. And that he changed our minds. So now you know how we were smart enough to buy Seas. Barely. The answer is barely.
He said to me, okay, this is my last question.
By the way, we're smarter now.
I'm glad. But I'm glad everybody appreciates Seas.
Yeah,
Don't you
exactly.
guys love Seas?
Yes.
Amazing. You said to me something about the high road.
Well, that's Warren's famous remark. I love that.
Share that.
Warren always says, you should always take the high road because it's less crowded.
In this insightful discussion, Charlie Munger shares the core principles behind his prodigious financial success, attributing it not to extreme mobility or innate genius, but to a mastery of basic tricks learned throughout his life, particularly from his rational and self-educated grandfather. He advocates for a win-win philosophy in all dealings, from business partnerships to customer relations, emphasizing long-term care for assets and people. Munger recounts the accidental beginnings of his Redlands investments and his pragmatic approach to apartment management. He delves into his investment philosophy with Warren Buffett, highlighting the importance of intrinsically good businesses and decisive action over excessive due diligence. The conversation also explores the unique nature of American philanthropy, which Munger links to historical shared hardships, and details his personal, idea-driven philanthropic endeavors, such as innovative housing projects at UCSB. Munger champions continuous self-education through reading and developing the ability to figure things out for yourself, while cautioning against the self-damaging effects of political hatred and resentment. Despite anticipating a tougher economic future, he stresses a stoic mindset in navigating life's challenges and the wisdom of constantly reevaluating one's best-loved ideas for continuous growth.